So this is a video of a heroic raid in which we get from the shark, the first phase, with starting from about 90% all the way to near the end of phase 4. The first thing you do here is I let the shark hit me at the beginning, only using basic moves, because that allows Baymax to purge everything that happens. Otherwise it's just a waste everything you do beforehand. These are the 5 characters that are part of the main team that does this, and you can watch some of these moves happening here, but the big key is if you look at that 4th icon of the shark's thing is his with the skull logo. That's the instant defeat. That's the skill that you want to make sure it doesn't charge up. You see the little bars above it? The goal is to bring it down. The way you bring it down is with Barley's Van, because that reduces magic with Guinevere when it hits the shark, and that's what prevents the insta-kill. Now you always want to keep tactics on Barley by cleansing him with Cobra, because that is how it guarantees that when the van hits, that the Barley's decrease of the magic will have effect. But there's not and you can see the magic decrease brings that down by 1. But it's not a full guarantee because the shark still has the ability to resist. Which is why it's so important. My Barley is gear 7 in this fight, but he has 1 piece of gear 8 gear, which is the potency piece, and that's the piece of gear 8 that you really need, because that's what can help make it so the shark can't resist you. So the hardest part of this whole run is to get through the shark. Now the key is the Baymax is in the center, because the shark pretty much always attacks what is in the center after the run gets going. And now I'll just tell you a little bit about what you want to do with each character. So Sven, you literally just want him to sit there and eat carrots. It builds up all these crits on him. See, here I put out the cauldron. That's the spell you want to use, because it's a big key to this run is to get the magic increase, but you have to be really careful when you put out the cauldron. You see what I did right there? I only want to put out the cauldron when I know that I have the ability to protect it at the beginning, because the shark will go right at the cauldron and it'll be all a waste instead of Baymax. Otherwise it just goes at Baymax. But for whatever reason, if you put out the cauldron without evasion, without protection, it will go at the cauldron first. But Baymax can taunt. So that's when it's important to have Baymax taunt and be a patient for somebody other than himself. Otherwise, I use Baymax patient move on himself, because he is the one who's always getting attacked and needs to get these things cleansed off of him. Now, Baymax obviously has 2 moves that he can use that are helpful. One is the one you saw I use at the beginning, was the full Baymax special, that it's right there. That's a great move to cleanse off all the negative continuous damage on Baymax, but obviously the problem with that move is that it hits the shark, whereas his patient move doesn't hit the shark. And why that's important is because you watch that yellow bar that moves there, that's the shark's turn meter. Anytime you make an attack towards the shark, a move that is directed at the shark, it speeds up his turn meter. But so you want to prioritize and use the moves that don't do that. And if you keep watching this run, you just want to watch how I always want to bring the insta-kill down with Barley's tactics, with Barley's Van and having tactics from Cobra. So Baymax patient move does not target the shark, so it won't speed up his turn meter. But sometimes you have to do that, otherwise Baymax will not survive, because the patient can only cleanse 2 of those continuous damages, and sometimes the shark gets like 4 or 5 on him, as you saw. But after Baymax uses his Baymax special, when he jumps at the shark, he actually is therefore immune to getting poisoned for the next turn. So Sven, that's also why Sven eats carrots, because when Sven eats carrots, it doesn't target the shark. It also builds crits on him, etc., which he's able to use, because the more effects that are on Sven when he does assist, whether it comes from the cauldron or from Barley or Cobra or from heroes, when he assists, it does a ton of damage, and that assist doesn't speed up the turn meter any more than them just hitting. So having this lineup, when Cobra can cleanse and does his silent stare down, which is what you want to keep using on the shark with Cobra, those moves don't speed up the shark's turn meter. Neither does Hero's shield of putting up evasion, and neither does Hero's move right there as he speeds up the cauldron of speeding up the cauldron. Barley also has a move with the Book of Yore, which increases the magic on a character. That also doesn't speed up the shark's turn meter. So the key is you just want to keep using all of those moves, and there obviously are ways in which you want to use them. You need to get evasions up with Hero. Those are important, but they're not really what you're going to prioritize, particularly at the beginning. The key is often to give Hero to give his turn to Cobra, because you really need Cobra a lot to bring down that yellow meter that's moving along the bottom before the shark can get a turn. Now once you're able to get the cauldrons out, you generally, unless there's kind of like an emergency that you need to use Barley because the shark's insta-kill is fully charged, or you really want to use Cobra to take down, because the shark's about to get a turn. If you go to Cobra, it can prevent him from getting a turn, which is helpful. But unless you really have a desperate situation like that, once you have the cauldron out, you want to use Hero just to speed up the cauldron, because that will give magic to that'll give 3 magic to different characters randomly. If it goes to Sven, it makes him attack, which is honestly not always the best thing, even though it does a lot of damage, because when Sven attacks from the cauldron, it can unexpectedly speed up the turn meter, which can cause problems if you don't want the shark to go soon. But as you see, it's great when it gives magic to Cobra or Barley or Hero, because then we can get more shields up. Cobra can slow down the shark. Barley's Guinevere and Books of Yore will charge faster. And that's all of what you want. And it's even great when it gives it to Baymax, because honestly the biggest problem with Baymax is, while it's great to have him being cleansing, it's his moves take a long time to charge, which can be problematic, because if he just uses his basic, it just speeds up the shark for nothing. So if the cauldron gives something to Baymax, it's not so bad. But as you can see, you always want to keep tactics on Barley, maybe from Cobra when it's available. It maxes out at 3 turns, so maybe on occasion I would give tactics to Sven. That just sometimes it puts a crit power on him, which can make it more powerful if he assists, or it just creates more buffs on him, which that's 100,000 damage. These can build up to like 250,000, so the more buffs that are on Sven, it increases the damage by 25% for every buff you get on Sven. But again, Sven just eats carrots in this phase, and pretty much always, though, if you really are about to beat the shark, you want to speed it up or get through it, and you know it's going to end it, and he's doing huge damage, I might attack with Sven. But here you can see the van keeps bringing down that insta-kill. If you've watched this whole time, and it's not necessarily that easy to do on Heroic, but the shark's insta-kill meter is all the way down right now, and there are different things that you do. I'm not really describing it all in the video, but you really have to make sure that insta-kill doesn't go up. And as you see, I use the cauldron here, and I copy the cauldron because it's just a way to get a little more magic going to your characters, which is what you need. You want those moves that don't speed up the shark's turn meter, and that allow Hero to put up evasion, allow Cobra to stare down the shark and bring down the shark's turn meter, and of course that allow Barley's van to charge, and Barley's Book of Yore. I don't think I mentioned Barley's Book of Yore. Barley's Book of Yore almost all the time I use on himself. What it does is it increases the magic on Barley, which is often the most important thing, because hitting the shark with Guinevere and bringing down the insta-kill is the most important thing really you can do. But if Guinevere is going to charge in the next turn anyway, there's no point to using the Book of Yore on Barley, so in that case I'll use it on Hero or Cobra, sort of depending where I think they are in their own moves charging, because really I don't want Hero's basic to hit the shark. I don't want Cobra's basic to have to hit the shark, because then that's just speeding up the turn meter. You can see Sven doing all the damage. Now here we're getting towards the end of the shark. Sven is hitting for about 100,000 a time. I've seen times when you get 250,000, but at this point I know it's getting close to the end, but obviously I also have it totally in control with the shark's insta-kill all the way down, though that can change kind of quickly. But once you're able to get all these cauldrons out, this becomes much easier. One of the biggest problems you have, and also why I let the shark hit me at the beginning, is because the cauldrons will only come out the spells will only charge once you receive some damage, and it actually can be really hard if you don't have the cauldron. So taking a bit of damage at the beginning, as long as your characters don't die, is good, and you can play with that a lot in Heroic, because that's the key to this whole thing, is you can forfeit at any time you want, and it brings all your characters right back to their worst. So there's just unlimited attempts to practice. Now there you can see that Sven has gotten up to 180,000, and I get rid of it. Now you get into the eels. This would be really hard with this team, though possible probably, to fight the eels if I didn't already have what I have built up. But as you look at all the evasions that are on everybody but Baymax, because the Sharks only been attacking Baymax. They all have about 30 evasions built up. Sven has all those guaranteed, those crits on him, so when he hits, he can hit really hard, particularly the more power he has him. And see, now if you just started in the eels phase and they do that, it would purge all the effects. The eels would charm you. They hit with their tails a bazillion times. But in this case, it doesn't have an impact because there are so many evasions built up on Hero that they have no impact. See, there was his attempt to charm, but the charm can't come through the shields. So it's kind of the same basic idea in this phase as the other phase. You do want to use Barley's Van, but a little more. I might use Sven directly on an eel just to speed things up if he's hitting really big, like 200,000 or something like that, because the eels don't have as much health as the shark. Now you can see once so much damage is done on the eels, they go into stealth mode at different times, that little yellow icon that's under Jetsam right now. So at that point you can't hit that eel, which is a little bit of a tough segment because you have to attack the eel. Then you're forced to attack the same eel over and over again. Otherwise, what you want to do is look at the turn meters, the yellow turn meters of the two eels, and see which one is going next. Because if you see which one is going, because you want to hit the one with a lower turn meter, because that will keep it longer until there are more turns. And if you have Cobra's stare down, you want to use it on the eel that is going to go sooner, that has the yellow bar farther along, because then it'll slow him down. A lot of people want to try to kill Flotsam on the left first because he can charm, but it doesn't really matter in this case which eel you're trying to kill first, because he actually can't charm through all this evasion that's built up when you come through the shark like this. Now I copied Sven with my Pan Shadow because it was available. That might have been a mistake. I put it in there to do some damage, but obviously, and I made sure that there were a lot of buffs on Sven so that the Shadow could do a lot of damage, and also having the Shadow there, the real Sven will often assist him, so I put it there. It can be a good idea or not, but you have to be careful because sometimes shadowing Sven can lead to the Shadow won't do a ton of damage, and it's just something to speed up the turn meters. But since with the eels you have a little bit more control going one to the other back and forth, which ones you hit, I decided in this instance to shadow Sven since the cauldron wasn't available. But as you can see, Sven is now hitting for big points, and the other Sven often assists. So I'm using Cobra still to cleanse Barley, and you want to look at the magic on all of the eels moves, make sure the eels don't get to insta-kill or really anything, but the eels are, because you can hit alternatively to each one, are much easier to control than the shark. If you have this all built up, this phase is not that hard as long as Sven is hitting with enough damage, and eventually I will actually start to hit with Sven directly some of the time in this phase because he's just doing so much damage that you can get to the end of it, particularly if you can kill off an eel. In this case, I'm killing Flotsam first, but it's really which eel. If you have this set up such that they're not going to charm you, which eel you kill first is just kind of a matter of whose turn meter leads you to hit them more at different times. But at this point now, I've gotten Flotsam's health so low that it is easier with one eel for the most part. So now because there won't be as many turns for them, even though you can't play with the turn meter in the same way then. So at this point, I'm considering taking some big hits of Sven onto Flotsam because it's not going to take too many more hits to get rid of him. As you can see, a lot of a poison is applied to Baymax, and it does a lot of damage to him, but that's why it's so critical what you've built up from the shark phase, because every time Heroes put up his evasion, it gives Baymax an undefeatable. So each poison, every time, basically the stage of the poison is so powerful that it would kill, but each poison on him would kill him separately. But if there are 3 poisons on Baymax, each time it's only able to take off 3 of the undefeatables. And I don't remember how many he started with, but as you can see, he still has 23 undefeatables now. So even if the eel's poison, it's not gonna kill him. It's just gonna take off the undefeatables. And you can see another 3 poisons. So next time, that will bring Baymax's health all the way down to 20. Now see, now I go at that eel on the left side, and he's gone. Now there's just 1 eel to attack. And again, you see in this case, there's nothing charged on these skills of the eels. There's not actually... Barley's van not as critical at this stage, but I've been using it throughout to make sure that the insta-kill and the other moves of the eels can't charge. And I said it was easier with the 2 eels, but obviously once you get down to 1 eel, runs the risk that you can only attack this 1 eel, so you do have to be a little careful you don't charge him up. But that's it. So if you look at Sven is now hitting for 172,000. That's what he built up, and that's going to get him done much faster. That's why I shadowed Sven, because even the other Sven can hit for 41,000. But as I said, that's a little risky. I'm not actually sure at the end of the day if that helps or not. To have the extra Sven out there, it does help to speed it up if you can get through it, but you do have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes when he's only hitting for 25,000, that might not be worth the speed meter that it increases. But as you can see in this run, finally some of the eels move with this single eels moves are charging a little bit, but there's really not the same danger as with the shark that the insta-kill is going to get charged up. And between Sven and his shadow, when he assists, it's hitting for about 200,000 a time. And here comes Barley's van. Every time you see it says magic decrease, and it brings down all the moves. If you get through the shark, this is actually really not that hard of a phase, as long as Sven is hitting for enough power, which is sometimes a little hard to figure out how to get him to hit for 200,000 or 300,000 as opposed to 100,000 or 50,000. But for the most part, he's going to do better the more helpful effects he has on him, which is why you want him eating those carrots all the time. And why, on occasion, if Barley doesn't need the tactics for the van at some moment, why you can give them from Cobra, because then it'll add some helpful effects onto him. See there, I cleanse Barley. It's important to keep the tactics on Barley so you can hit with the van. That's why the potency piece is so important. You see almost every time Barley's van hits, the magic decreases. If he wasn't on gear 7, and if he didn't have the single gear 8 potency piece, there would be more resistance, so the eels are not the ones who resist so much. That's more of a problem with the shark, and you'll see in phase 3 against Ursula that she still resists, even with the gear 8 potency piece on Barley, so that's a hard phase for this. As you see, I shadowed the cauldron again. Shadowing the cauldron makes everything easier because it's a way to increase the magic. Against this, mostly I use Baymax Patient on himself. Doing his Baymax special could help. Sometimes it would actually restore health to him, but the reason why the Patient move is sort of preferable is because it doesn't charge up the speed meter of the shark or Ursula or Flotsam and Jetsam. So unless you really are trying to cleanse a lot of debuffs, you'd rather just use the Patient. Now here's this last phase. This is, again, another phase where it's so critical what you set up against the shark with all of these evasions, because there's nothing, because Ursula hits so many times, as you can see that at Baymax. This is a phase in which Ursula has very little health, so it can actually be helpful to use Sven to hit at some points to speed this up, just to get you out of the phase. Ursula does have the ability to blind or silence Sven back there. Silencing Sven, she'll only silence in that spot Sven is in, and she will silence only if there are no... she's guaranteed to silence that spot if she has no negative effects on her. So you want to get some kind of negative effect on her from... Barley can do it with his passive on occasion. Cobra can put a negative effect on with his basic, and so can Hero. That's where those slows are coming from. The critical chance down, which is the red one that's there now, that just comes from Barley's passive. There's like a 30% chance that it does it or something like that. But as you can see now, I'm attacking. This is actually really one of the harder phases to keep the insta-kill and the charges down. You see, once that the contract with the skull there is the insta-kill that you don't want to charge, and Ursula hits so many times with her little zap thing that it's finally going to get through all of Baymax's insta-kills. As you see, the contract is now, sorry, all Baymax undefeatables, and you see that Barley's van, you saw the contract was fully charged. That was so critical that Barley took out, brought the magic down in that case to bring the contract down, because otherwise that would be the end of a character, Baymax. But as you see, Ursula resisted the van that time, so even though Barley has tactics on him, these characters still have the ability to resist. And that's why you want the potency gear on, because it prevents them from being able to resist as much. But Ursula resists a lot. As you can see now, I'm making a lot of moves to try to get it so I can get back in a position with Ursula, with Barley having the tactics from Cobra and the van charged, but I wasn't able to do it successfully, so finally I lose a character here in Baymax. As I said, she resists, she charges really fast. This is a case where I have shadowed Sven to speed things up, but it's honestly probably was not the best move because he's just not doing a lot of damage. So it's having more to speed up the turn. And you see another resistance. That's why I ultimately lost Baymax. Sometimes you can get to this phase where those hits from Sven are more like 150, 200,000. They're only 70,000 right now, so that's actually part of the problem. This is why you don't want to lose Baymax, because Baymax survives through his undefeatables sometimes. Because now Ursula is coming at hero and taking off all of his evasions, which is going to make it harder but obviously the evasions are still really helpful and help him to survive. Now her health is really low, so now is when I want to hit with Sven because I think I can just get out of the phase. And this gets it to the last part of the phase. By the point I got here, this is not really a good example of how to do this. First of all, I didn't realize that Ursula's insta-kill in this phase on heroic charges twice. The first thing every time in this phase is you want to get rid of the tentacles. There's no way real to do it with Sven. Hitting the tentacles with Sven doesn't do any damage to Ursula, but you really want to just get rid of the tentacles to start with. You saw to help do it, I also prevented Ursula's from turns going, but it stuns Ursula the first time you take out the tentacles, so you want to make sure you're doing that. Now here's a tough question of whether to use the van or not with Barley, because there was actually no charges on the insta-kill yet, so kind of want to save the van. But again, I choose to get rid of the tentacles, but the insta-kill charges in this one. This is not, as I said, not a great example of how to handle this phase, because ultimately I do lose the characters before the end, and often this phase is actually not one in which it's not necessarily one of the harder ones, but I haven't done it heroic really very often, so maybe on heroic it's harder. Part of the problem is that if Ursula doesn't have any negative effect on her, she gets a magic at the beginning of her turn and after she takes her turn, which means that the insta-kill can get 2 charges in a turn. It can even get 2 charges in a turn like that, even if it has negative effects, but it's guaranteed if she has no of those red negative effects on her. And the fact that her magic increased so quickly kind of threw me for a loop, and eventually I lose hero here because of that. As I said, I've done this on tier 4 and tier 5 a number of times, so I didn't really expect to necessarily lose in this phase or have to worry about Ursula's insta-kill fully charging, but it was a little bit tougher than I thought. But maybe if I paid a little more attention, that wouldn't have happened. But one problem is that if you start in phase 4, you can also often have another damage dealing character. See right there, she's charging up every time she takes a turn, it charges up her magic, and she has no negative effects on her anymore, which I didn't realize is part of, well, there's a negative effect now, but as I said, every time she takes a turn, it has the ability to have 2 charges on her insta-kill and all of her moves, which is a little bit of a problem. But you keep doing the same thing otherwise. Barley hits with the van to decrease her magic, Cobra cleanses Barley and gives him tactics, and then you want Sven to assist. I think I may have in this phase used Barley's basic sometimes when I didn't need to, which makes Sven attack, which was just a way to try to get things speeding along. That might have been why I ran into some problems. But there's a lot of damage that Sven does when he assists, and that's what you want him to do rather than to hit directly with Sven or even Barley's basic. You'd rather use Barley's moves other than his basic unless you feel really confident in getting to the end. Now, if I were just starting this in phase 4 without having gotten here, I would ideally could use another character in the center. It doesn't really have to be Baymax. He's not necessary for this stage. In fact, it's actually really better that Baymax didn't get here. It's easier to win this without Baymax because all he does is to speed up Ursula's turn meter when he has to use his basic, and his patient and his cleanse aren't, and his Baymax special just aren't necessary. Now see here, the insta-kill charge, I just literally wasn't paying attention. It charged on me. She charged up really fast. Now I'm trying to save it here, but Hero is gone, and that makes it a little harder to finish this run. Now it's 194,000. You can see Sven hits the hardest when he has all of those when he has all those 191. It can get up to like 250, 300,000. When he has effects on him, it really charges really fast. Losing Hero makes it very hard to get to the end because don't really need the evasions at this point. They have so many evasions on them, and that's not really what Ursula does in phase 4, but Hero can speed up Sven, which is only helpful because it adds power up to him. You still want Sven to just eat carrots, but Hero all this time can, speed up Barley or Cobra when you want them to, which enables Cobra to use his stare down, or Barley to get to use the van when you need it. So without Hero, you kind of lose a lot of the control I had previously. But Sven does a lot of damage to help bring this down with his hits. But at this point, it's going to become a lot harder to eventually control her insta-kills. You can see she gains 2 magic in that instance. There was a negative effect on her, so it wasn't guaranteed that was going to happen, but it did. And now I can't get Sven back to the hitting for 180,000 or more quite as easily, because the only way to add more positive effects to him would be to cleanse him with Cobra, but I often need that for Barley, because Hero can't... When Hero speeds up Sven, he gives him power up and offense up and some other effects that are helpful. But this goes on. Eventually, I lose in this one. There are ways around that. As I said, this is the hardest phases in this really is to get through the shark and phase 3. But see, there's that double. She's going to charge a couple times here, which is a problem. Barley's Book of Yore it doesn't actually do much when you put it on Sven, and you can just watch this to the end. But that's how you get through here. She starts charging up her moves way too fast now that I can't control as much with Hero. If you were just to start in phase 4, as I said, Baymax is really not essential or even useful to this phase. You could do it. If I were to add a 5th character, if I didn't have to get here through the other phases, you just Stitch is a great character because if you're able to put a few tactics on him from Cobra, he puts all these defense downs on Ursula that really helps. Anyway, this goes on. Eventually she charges up, but that's how you get here. This is the team. This is the exact positioning you want to use. It's programmed to take them out in that order, basically, in the positions if there are insta-kills that come into place. So takes out Baymax first, and also attacks at Baymax in the shark phase for the most part, and then the spot where Hero is where she'd go next, and then at Cobra, and then at Barley and Sven. So that's the order that this goes in. But there you go. That's how you get here. This is not a solo of the entire heroic grade, but you can see the mechanics of how you do it. And if my characters were fully gear 8, they'd probably be even better. As I said, I have the key gear 8 piece on Barley and also the potency gear 8 piece on Cobra, which are central pieces. I do not have the gear 8 crit power piece on Sven, which is an important piece because it makes him hit harder. And in case you're wondering about the stones, Barley has a speed stone, Cobra has a speed stone, Hero has a speed stone, Baymax has a health stone, and Sven has a crit power stone. He's probably the only character in the game that benefits more from the crit power stone than an offense stone, particularly in the raid, because he creates his own guaranteed crits, so the critical power takes effect every single time he hits. Alright.